Imagine this. You check into a Sheraton hotel on a Tuesday night. Business trip, you hand over your passport, swipe your credit card, and head to your room. Normal routine, forgettable. But what you don't know is that the moment your information entered that reservation system, it was copied. Your name, your passport number, your credit card, your date of birth, where you traveled, when you arrived, and when you left. All of it. Silently siphoned by hackers who had been living inside that system for years. Not days, not months, 4 years. And you weren't alone. 500 million travelers were exposed in what became one of the largest data breaches in human history. But the truly terrifying part, this wasn't about money. US intelligence officials believed this was espionage, a state-sponsored operation designed to track the movements of government officials, military personnel, and intelligence officers around the globe. To understand how 500 million people got exposed, you have to go back to a corporate boardroom, not a hacker's basement. Starwood Hotels and Resorts was a hospitality giant. They owned some of the most prestigious hotel brands on the planet. Sheraton, Westin, W Hotels, St. Regis, Le Méridien, hundreds of properties in dozens of countries, millions of guests cycling through their reservation system every year. And that reservation system, it was the crown jewel. Every booking, every passport scan, every credit card swipe, all funneled into one massive database. Now here's the problem. Starwood's cybersecurity was, to put it bluntly, a disaster. Their servers were running outdated versions of Windows. Their remote desktop protocol ports, the digital doorways that let employees access systems remotely, were left wide open to the internet. Their internal tool called Accolade, which allowed employees to request website changes, had a vulnerable web shell that was essentially an unlocked backdoor. This is what psychologists call normalcy bias, the tendency to assume that because nothing bad has happened yet, nothing bad will happen. Starwood had been operating this way for years. No breach, no alarm. So why fix what isn't broken? But someone was watching, and they had already found the open door. On July 29, 2014, an attacker exploited that vulnerable web shell on the Accolade application. They gained direct access to a Starwood server, and within that first session, they installed a remote access Trojan, a rat, a piece of malware that gave them persistent, invisible control over the system. Even if passwords changed, even if employees logged out, the attackers could walk right back in whenever they wanted. The ghost was inside the house, and nobody knew. Now pay attention to this part, because what happened next wasn't a smash and grab. It was slow, methodical, patient, the kind of operation that doesn't come from a teenager in a hoodie. It comes from a well-funded, highly trained team. After establishing their foothold with the rat, the attackers deployed a tool called Mimikatz, an open-source program designed to scrape usernames and passwords directly from a computer's memory. Think of it like this. Every time a Starwood employee logged into the system, their credentials were briefly stored in memory. Mimikatz grabbed those credentials like a pickpocket lifting wallets in a crowded subway. With stolen administrator credentials in hand, the attackers could now impersonate legitimate users. They moved laterally through Starwood's network, jumping from server to server, escalating their privileges, burrowing deeper. They eventually reached the guest reservation database, the motherlode. And here's where it gets truly chilling. Starting around April 2015, investigators later found files with names like reservation_room_sharer.dmp, database dumps designed to extract and package guest records for removal. The hackers were methodically copying the entire reservation database. Names, mailing addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, dates of birth, gender, arrival and departure dates, passport numbers, and encrypted credit card details for 327 million guests. But it gets worse. The encryption protecting those credit card numbers required 2 separate components to decrypt. Marriott later admitted they couldn't rule out that both components had been stolen, meaning those encrypted numbers might not have been protected at all. The attackers also installed memory scraping malware designed to capture payment card data in real time, grabbing card numbers as guests checked in before the data was even encrypted. And throughout all of this, nothing. No alerts, no flags. No one at Starwood noticed a thing. The hackers moved through the system like they owned it, because functionally, they did. Now, in September 2016, something massive happened. Marriott International acquired Starwood Hotels for $13 billion, becoming the largest hotel chain in the world. They inherited 5,500 properties, millions of loyalty members, and a global brand portfolio. They also inherited a compromised network with active intruders, and they had no idea. This is a textbook case of what cybersecurity experts call inherited risk. Marriott conducted due diligence on Starwood's finances, legal obligations, and brand value, but their cybersecurity audit, inadequate. They never discovered the attackers already living inside the system. And after the acquisition, they laid off most of Starwood's corporate IT and security staff. The very people who understood the network best. The foxes were in the henhouse, and Marriott just fired the guard dogs. For 2 more years after the acquisition, the attackers continued operating inside the Starwood reservation system completely undetected. 2 years of copying data, 2 years of scraping credentials, 2 years of invisible access to the travel patterns of 500 million people. And the craziest part, there were warning signs. In 2015, a completely separate attacker had breached Starwood's payment systems. A different hack that went undetected for 8 months before being discovered. That should have triggered a full security audit. It should have been a red flag screaming that Starwood's defenses were Swiss cheese, but the response was minimal. The first breach was treated as an isolated incident, patched and forgotten. Nobody thought to look deeper. Nobody asked. If one attacker got in this easily, who else might already be inside? This is what psychologists call anchoring bias, latching onto the first explanation and failing to consider broader possibilities. Starwood found one breach and assumed they'd found the problem. Meanwhile, the real intruders were watching from the shadows, undisturbed. And this is where the story takes a darker turn, because US intelligence officials later concluded this wasn't ordinary cybercrime. Private investigators found hacking tools, techniques, and infrastructure previously linked to Chinese state-sponsored groups. The stolen data, particularly the passport numbers and travel records, wasn't showing up on the dark web. It wasn't being sold. It wasn't being used for credit card fraud. It was being collected, cataloged, analyzed. Think about what that database contains. Not just names and numbered, movement patterns. Who stayed at which hotel, in which city, on which dates, and with whom? For military personnel, government employees, intelligence officers, diplomats, that information is a goldmine for a foreign intelligence service. You can track who travels to sensitive regions. You can identify covert operatives by their travel patterns. You can cross-reference hotel stays with other stolen databases, like the Office of Personnel Management breach that exposed security clearance files on millions of government workers. Marriott is the top hotel provider for the US government and military. That's not a coincidence. That's a target. China denied any involvement. But in February 2020, the US Department of Justice charged 4 members of the Chinese military for the related Equifax breach and explicitly linked it to the Marriott and OPM breaches as part of the same coordinated intelligence campaign. The unraveling began on September 8, 2018, 4 years and 2 months after the initial intrusion. A newly deployed internal security monitoring tool managed by Accenture flagged an unusual database query on the Starwood reservation system. Someone with administrator privileges was accessing the database in a way that didn't match normal patterns. Marriott's investigators dug deeper. They discovered the query came from a legitimate admin account, but the person assigned to that account hadn't made it. Someone else was using their credentials. On September 17th, investigators found the Rati. They blocked the IP address it used for command and control communication. In October, they discovered Mimikatz had been deployed multiple times. By November, the full horror emerged. The breach stretched back to July 2014, and the attackers had encrypted and attempted to exfiltrate two massive compressed files containing guest records. On November 30th, 2018, Marriott went public. The announcement sent shockwaves through the world. Up to 500 million guest records compromised, 339 million confirmed, 5.25 million unencrypted passport numbers stolen. The consequences were swift. The UK's Information Commissioner's Office initially proposed a fine of £99 million under GDPR, later reduced to £18.4 million. In October 2024, Marriott agreed to a $52 million settlement with all 50 US states. The FTC ordered Marriott to implement a comprehensive information security overhaul. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For a company generating billions in annual revenue, those fines were pocket change. Critics called them a slap on the wrist. And the stolen data? You can't unsteal 500 million passport numbers. The damage was done. The Marriott Starwood breach isn't just a cybersecurity failure. It's a masterclass in how human psychology creates vulnerability. First, there's the normalcy bias at Starwood, the dangerous assumption that past safety guarantees future safety. Their systems had been insecure for years, but because no visible disaster had occurred, no one prioritized fixing them. Then there's diffusion of responsibility. When Marriott acquired Starwood, who was responsible for securing the inherited network? Starwood's old team was being laid off. Marriott's team didn't fully understand the systems. In the gap between ownership and oversight, attackers thrived. And for the victims, all 500 million of them, there's optimism bias. We hand over our most sensitive information to hotels, airlines, and apps every single day, trusting that someone on the other end is protecting it. We assume the system works because we need it to work. We can't function in modern life if we stop and question every data handoff. The Marriott breach asks a question we still haven't answered. In a world where your passport number, your travel history, and your identity live in corporate databases protected by outdated software and underfunded security teams, who is truly responsible when it all falls apart? What do you think? Should companies like Marriott face criminal charges, not just fines, when they fail to protect hundreds of millions of people? Drop your take in the comments.